Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So excited to see so many people here for this really important discussion. My name is Dani Nierenberg, and I am the president and co-founder with Bernard Pollock of Food Tank. We are a research and advocacy organization really devoted to highlighting stories of hope and success in our food and agriculture systems. We do this with the aim to inspire, motivate, and ultimately activate positive transformation in how we produce and consume food. I am so honored to be here today. I want to give the organizers of this amazing event a round of applause. Please, thank you to Nest and all of the people who put so much hard work into this. The conference center staff doing an amazing job. So another round of applause for them, please. The sponsor of this panel is Hellmann's, a Unilever brand, of course, best known for its mayonnaise. And today we'll be focusing on the pivotal role of innovation and collaborative efforts in the ongoing mission to reduce food waste. And I want to break down some stats for you. I think a lot of you in this room will probably know these, but I think they're worth repeating. If food waste were a country, it would be the third largest emitter of greenhouse gas emissions, just behind China and the United States. Here in the United States, about 40% of all food is wasted, which makes it very, very expensive in terms of labor and the cost of disposing of that food. And it's a cost to consumers at the end of the day who, right now with inflation, prices of food going up, this is really a big cost for eaters. At the same time, millions of people worldwide are currently facing the threat of food insecurity. So for me, food waste really represents both an environmental and sort of moral conundrum. And I think it's, what's exciting about this is there's so much opportunity and there's so many solutions out there. And many of them are low cost and very innovative. Others depend on different kinds of innovation and technology, but they're all really exciting. And I think it's because this is a problem we can solve, and it's a problem that can help mitigate the climate crisis in really concrete ways. So I'm really excited to introduce our panel. First, we have Caroline Vance, Harry Tannenbaum, and Stefani Millie Grant. I'm going to give them all an opportunity to introduce themselves and talk a little bit about their work, and then we'll get into the discussion. So Caroline, if you want to go first, that would be great.
Sure. Thank you so much, Dani. So ReFed is a national nonprofit that was set up to really focus on the issue of how much food is going to waste every day around this country, and trying to bring that down. And we do that through a few different ways. First, we are a data organization at our heart, and we house a wealth of information on the scale and the scope of the problem in the US on our website. We also then spend a lot of our time trying to deliver that information in a way that can help people take practical action to reduce their waste. So we do that by convening groups together. We do that by trying to encourage capital to flow to food waste solutions, and being kind of an educational resource for policy and others. So that's ReFed.
And ReFed has a really great annual conference that, all of the things that Caroline just discussed are sort of brought together there with a lot of different experts.
Thank you for that plug.
Harry.
My name is Harry Tannenbaum. I am a surfer. I'm a Gemini. I founded a company called Mill that it makes it easy to recycle food. And actually, just sidebar, I don't think Mill would exist without the work of ReFed, Caroline's organization. As a newly excited to work on climate person in the middle of the pandemic, I sort of started Googling what the largest types of waste were, and was shocked to see that food is the #1 thing in our landfills. And as I went deeper, the data from ReFed was really invaluable. So just check out ReFed, it's an incredible thing. What we do at Mill, the idea is we have to make it easy to do the right thing. So we have this new kind of bin that we've created. It's been described as felt. It plugs in your kitchen, and you put all the food you can't eat into it. And what we do is we take the water out of food. Food's 80% water, so when you dehydrate it, it gets really small and stable. The bin takes like a month to fill up, and we cook a bunch at home. And then we've opened up a pathway to get those food grounds, we call them, like coffee grounds, back to us, and we can turn them into food for animals, which is a really high use and a way to get it back into the food system. So that's what we're up to at Mill.
It's so common sense. It makes a lot. It's very practical. Stephanie.
Good morning, Stefani Millie Grant with Unilever. I work really closely with our Hellmann's brand, and what excites me and what I really love working on is Hellmann's purpose, which is make taste, not waste. And it seems so simple in a way. Food is too good to be wasted. So how can we make food taste really good and continue to eat it? So obviously Hellmann's is a key ingredient that can help within that. But we also know that consumers need help on this. We need educating. We need different things around it to help consumers realize what's going on with that. So if you've paid attention to the Super Bowl the last few years, Hellmann's has been talking about this in a really big way. We've had Super Bowl ads for 3 years now. And we're also launched the Fridge Night app, which helps you say, okay, hey, I've got these ingredients in my fridge, what can I do? And you can go to an app and it'll give you some ideas on what to cook for dinner within that. So trying to educate consumers, help consumers understand what's going on out there, but also understanding, hey, it's not just us. This is a really big systemic problem, and we need to partner with the refeds, with the mills, and where's the technology and innovation come in to help consumers waste less food and eat more of it.
Thank you, and I want to continue on this consumer angle because I think it's so important. So Caroline and Stephanie, what role do consumers play in all this, first of all? And then what kind of education do they need? Because we're talking about something that seems very common sense to a lot of us, but at the end of the day, we're all busy. There are things in our refrigerators that we don't know what to do with. You mentioned that. But what kind of education are you hearing about from consumers that they actually need? Maybe I start with you, Caroline.
Yeah, and maybe I can just start by sort of setting some of the context for
Please.
the issue and why consumers should care about this. So ReFed calculates that about a third of everything that's produced in this country goes unsold or uneaten every year. And that's the equivalent of about 149 billion meals, or 2% of GDP. So that's a major impact on the economy, but also think of the impact on the environment. All of the emissions that went into growing, harvesting, transporting, processing, cooling that food, only for it to be disposed of. And then to kind of add urgency to the issue, the bulk of what households throw away, or about half of what households throw away, goes to landfills, where in the landfill the food breaks down without oxygen and emits methane. And methane is up to 80 times more potent than carbon dioxide from a warming perspective over a 20-year time horizon. So, I mean, if you want to tackle climate change in a urgent, direct manner, targeting methane emissions is a good way to go. So that's kind of the big picture why. I think from a public awareness perspective, we've been encouraged at ReFed to see that there is just sort of increasing attention paid to the issue. We see our data and our statistics and facts getting picked up in more and more publications. But I think the message needs to continue to get out in a really concentrated way with kind of practical steps that people can incorporate into their daily lives, because we haven't yet seen that awareness convert into action. The statistics are still way far away from where we want to be, cutting in half food waste by 2030.
Absolutely. Stephanie?
Yeah, I think to add on to that, 70% of all people globally say, yes, food waste is an issue and we should address it. But if you're kind of looking at the US specifically, 73% of Americans say, oh, I do better than the average American. Maybe not, when 48% of all food waste is coming out of, or excess food is coming out of consumers' homes.
Sure.
So we all need to do a better job about it. And I'm guilty as anyone else on
Sure.
this, as we are within that. So, and Caroline hit on it. This is wasting resources. If you think about 1/5 of all fresh water, especially with the droughts we're seeing, California and in the West, in those drought areas, even I'm seeing it in certain areas of the Midwest where the rains haven't been great this year on the crops. 16% of all cropland use goes into that, and then 24% of the landfill impact within that. So that's a huge number. If we could start reducing that, that's a huge help to the climate.
Absolutely, and we can talk more about this in a minute, but it's also a huge help to the millions of people who are hungry in the United States. Harry, I want to turn to you, because when we last spoke, you were talking about how it's really great that consumers want to do good, and that they want to prevent food waste, and that desire is necessary, but it's not sufficient to solve this problem. And so I'm wondering, from your perspective and from Mill's perspective, what kind of strategies and initiatives are really going to get at this problem?
So, great question. I think if we think about decarbonizing the economy, we need systems change. And while all of us, I think, want to do the right thing, if we're going to decarbonize the economy at scale, it needs to be better, faster, and cheaper than the systems that exist today. We can't rely on folks' intent to do something different, because as someone that makes products for consumers and as someone who is a consumer, I am fundamentally lazy. And I am fundamentally set in my ways. And if I'm going to change my behavior, it needs to be easier. It needs to be better than what exists today. And I think you look at food waste, and this is a tractable problem. 40% of food is wasted. The agricultural sector is 25% of our emissions, so doing some multiplication, that could be 12% of emissions. Research says it's anywhere between 8 and 15% of our emissions. We don't need to invent nuclear fusion. We just need to stop throwing food in the trash can. This isn't something that needs to wait until 2050, and it's fundamentally a behavior change issue. But the problem is, like, handling food in your house is not easy. There's not an Apple-like experience. And the thing that we really focus on is, how do you make it easy for people to do the right thing? And how do you make it cool? And how do you encourage friends to tell other friends to do that? And that's really a lens that we look at product development through, is folks' good intentions will only go so far, and we need to design new systems that can make it easy to do the right thing.
And I think that's why, from the Hellmann's perspective, technology and innovation is such an important piece of this. Like, there's only so much each of us can do, but we've got to have these easy button. I've used it in many other things. Where's that easy button that makes it so people are waste less food, or put it in the bin, or whatever it is, that it's being reused in the right way.
And I think that's a really cool thing about looking at food waste as a problem through a waste prevention lens, or if we look at all carbon emissions as waste. When we prevent waste from systems, they become more efficient. And these are the kind of systems at scale we need to change the way that the economy works. But they're going to be more efficient, and it's going to make economic sense as well as environmental sense.
Thank you. Caroline, this question of sort of preventing food waste cool, I wonder how an organization like ReFed, which is so great at collecting numbers and making sure that we have all of this great information around food loss and food waste, how do we help consumers and businesses understand that this is the right thing to do, it's the cool thing to do, and it's going to save them money?
That's a great question, and it's what we try to do with our metrics and our data. I think if we have a downfall in that area, it's really that we're in so many metrics, and we tend to talk in kind of a wonky way, when I think it's very much like you just said, just don't throw that sandwich in the trash can. And I think what ReFed can do is we can try to take our data and translate it into something that's a little bit more practical and tangible. And we have partners that we sometimes work with to do things like this. We've supported Food Waste Prevention Week, which is a wonderful campaign that happens during Earth Month, and it engages students across the nation. There's an art contest, and just really engaging people in a practical way, kind of where they are. So we can partner with people to do that. Sometimes we're very much in our numbers, and we need to remember that the numbers can only take us so far.
but they're so needed. And I think that's what we have to remember about this issue especially, that some of the numbers for many years on a global level have been so squishy. I don't know another word for it, but getting the right numbers so that companies and consumers and policymakers especially can make better decisions is really, really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, this is kind of taking us maybe in a different direction than you wanted to go, Danny, but to speak to one of the things that I think is so important in getting those numbers is having kind of intersector collaboration. And one of the partnerships that ReFed is involved in supporting is called the Pacific Coast Food Waste Commitment. And it's kind of, I think it's the largest public-private partnership focused on reducing food waste in the world right now. And it brings together an array of different types of food businesses that would typically be competitors. You know, we have Kroger, we have Walmart, and they are collaborating, they're sharing data, they're sharing best practices, and that gives us a better picture of not only what is happening, you know, our numbers need to be accurate, and that's where it can come from, but also what is working, what's actually having an impact. And without that sort of pre-competitive collaboration, which is sometimes so hard to get at, we can't get there. So collaboration is so important in this space.
I'm so glad that you brought that up. So Stefani, I want to turn to you and talk a little bit, give you a chance to talk about Unilever's Future Food Initiative, because I believe collaboration and partnership is key to that.
Yes, absolutely. So whether it's within our own four walls of Unilever, so we've got we want to cut our food waste in half also, doing that, but then also where can we partner with others? And that's one of the things that I really appreciate about Unilever is we're never one of these that want to hold it in. We know to get the change that's needed, we've got to partner with others. So ReFed, partnering different, you know, companies, organizations, NGOs, we're really open to be doing that and looking at what's really needed for the future and how can we partner together, because we'll get there a lot faster than if we do it by ourselves.
Absolutely,
And
absolutely.
one of the things we're partnering on here locally, as you mentioned policy, is the date labeling, Food Date Labeling Act. How many of you have opened up your pantry, your fridge, and started looking at products? Is this still good, is it not? Because you get a variety of best if used by, freeze or use by. You get this, and people are like, I don't know if this is good or not, when many times the food is still good. So we've been collaborating with ReFed, with Harvard Law and Food Policy, and other companies saying, hey, if companies are going to put date labels on their products, let's use two different ones. Best if used by for quality, and used by for safety purposes. So consumers, and then also there needs to be an education, and that's a big piece of this too, but educating consumers so people can look at it and say, okay, well this is past the date, but it's probably still good, and it's only a few days, I don't need to toss it yet. Tastes good, smells good, it's fine. Or, oh, this is, yeah, definitely used by safety, let's go ahead and dispose of it properly. So hopefully that will also help consumers save money, eliminate that confusion, and that's something that we can all partner on together.
Yeah, that confusion is, we all do it. We all look in our refrigerators instead of just tasting it and saying, okay, maybe this is off. Harry.
Yeah, I saw there's a box of pink Himalayan sea salt that on the box it said, made over 10 million years. And then it was like, expires June 2024. It's like, something's not right there.
Definitely.
Yeah, we really need to find ways to eliminate that confusion. Part of this, I think, it comes back to the innovation that we were talking about earlier. So, Harry, I think it would be helpful if for the audience and for all of us, you could explain what Mills bin looks like, what it does, how you use it, how much space is it going to take up in your kitchen?
So, and there is one here in the sort of garden pavilion, which I think is sort of a hook to the right from here, which you can check out. Okay, so step one in thinking about changing consumer behavior is mimic existing behaviors. So a prior company a lot of us at Mills spent time at was Nest, no relation to this Nest, but we made a thermostat. And we made a round thermostat that you put on the wall that you turned because that was a behavior folks were familiar with. So in thinking about the hardware that we build, yeah, it looks like a waste bin that might go in your house from a form factor size. It's white, it has a metal exterior, and inside there, for lack of a better word, there's a reactor. It's a bucket. And this bucket has paddles inside of it. And what's kind of neat is those paddles can actually exert around 2,000 pounds of force. So this is somewhere between like a thermostat and a motorcycle that we've built for your food. And okay, why 2,000 pounds of force? Well, we wanted it to be able to take everything. You know, the second we start telling you, well, you can't put an avocado pit in there, or, you know, things that are tough, you know, we won't be able to handle. Now we're adding friction for a potential user, and any point of friction makes it less likely that all the food in a household isn't going to go in there. So you scrape your plate, anything you can eat, it can eat, goes into the bin, and at night, automagically, it sort of turns on. The bin has a scale in it, it has temperature and moisture sensors in it, so we know just how long to heat it up. And think about us cooking the water out of that food in a very energy efficient, low and slow way. The water evaporates out the back of the bin, and you're left with this dehydrated food, which actually smells kind of good. The bin itself doesn't smell at all, and that's another thing we had to figure out. There can be zero odor associated with this process. And we have a special odor filtration system that has a super porous material in it. There's a square mile of surface area in this filter that's about the size of a six-pack. So it catches any kind of residual smell that comes out of it. And just to be clear, there's no microbial activity in the bin. We're just drying the material out, so it's still food. And then we were kind of like, okay, this is cool. We've made this bin that doesn't stink, that takes the water out of it, and we started thinking about what to do with the material. It's interesting, you light it on fire and it burns at higher BTUs than wood pellets. But you do micro and macro nutritional work on it and you realize there's 18 or 19% protein in this material. The food that we throw away is really good stuff. And just a sidebar, isn't it a head trip that like you're eating off a plate and then you put the plate in the sink and all of a sudden the stuff on the plate all of a sudden is food waste? Even though it was just food like 10 seconds before, now it's food waste. I don't know what the sink does. But the idea is, can we keep this food as food? And that's a really important idea. I think that just because something isn't eaten doesn't mean that it has to become waste immediately. And when we take the water out of material, it doesn't rot. Get down to about 13% moisture content. This stuff is stable, and then there are easier ways to move it around. Another crazy thought, you know, imagine you're an alien from another planet. They say, food seems amazing. It's this amazing, delicious thing. What do you do with it when you're done with it? And we say, well, we put it in diesel trucks that are kind of filled with water, and we truck it around, and we bury it in a hole to make poison. So you take the water out of the material, and you can actually empty the bin into a box about once a month, and then you push a button in an app, and the US Postal Service comes and picks it up and gets it to a good place. If you have chickens at home, you can feed it to chickens. If you're a backyard composter, you can compost the material as well. But the idea is, can we make a tight loop that is accessible to many people? Some of us are fortunate to live in places like San Francisco or Seattle that have curbside collection for food scraps, but only about 7% of the United States has that today. So in many major metropolitan areas, really unless you're going to take a huge amount of effort, the validated pathway for food that isn't eaten in your home is in the trash can.
Harry, I'm interested in how consumers sort of view this and what you've heard anecdotally.
They think it's cool. And I'm biased, right? Because it's my company. But no, they think it's cool, and they like it more than they think they will.
Sure.
I don't think many of us sort of sit bolt upright in the morning and go, my trash can, it stinks. But when you take the food out of trash, your trash can doesn't stink anymore. And to the stat you shared earlier, I'm not going to make folks raise hands, but yeah, the majority of people think they waste less food than the average.
Yeah.
But actually having data that comes back from the bin that says, yo, did you know you put like 25 pounds of food in there last month? That's kind of expensive. It helps us not make food waste an invisible thing.
Right.
It sort of makes it visible. and things that aren't measured don't tend to move. So we feed actionable data back to folks, and that's important.
That's really, really important that consumers are getting that back to them. Continuing on this theme of sort of innovative products, can you talk about the Smart Jar?
Sure.
I'm really interested in this.
As am I. This is something that we launched in the UK, and it is a jar. First of all, I'm going to ask, how many in this room know what the optimal temperature is, or the maximum temperature you should keep your refrigerator at? Does anybody know? 40 degrees per FDA, but close, close. But 85% of the people in the US don't know this.
Sure.
And how many of us actually check it? How many keep a thermometer in your fridge to know exactly what it is? I do not, and this is something I'm going to go home and do now after this. But given that, you know, food can 3 days faster go bad and not taste good. And then if it doesn't taste good, you don't want to eat it, and you're going to put it in the trash or whatever. So we designed a jar, and that we launched in the UK, a Smart Jar, that will tell you when your fridge is over that 40 degrees. And what it does, it has, and I'm going to get my notes to say this correct, thermochromatic ink that is activated when the fridge gets over that 40 degrees. So there's messages and there's images on it, and that will show you that, hey, check your fridge, things aren't right here, you need to get it cooler to keep your food better longer. We also have, we're hoping to launch this small pilot in the US sometime in 2024, but we do have an example of one also in the eatery that you can see if you go over there. It's all set up along with the bin, the mill bin, so you can check out both with that. So I think it's a really cool innovation, and that's where we've got to continue to innovate and make it easy for people. That easy button, going back to that, where people can say, oh, wait, oh, look, I need to mess with this and change it, instead of like, oh, wait, what's my thermometer say in the back of the fridge, and where am I, or even remember to put one in. So how can we make it easy? How can we make it simple for people to do that?
Sure. And I'm going to turn to Caroline now, but I do want to come back to the question of both costs for Mills product and the Smart Jar. Caroline, from ReFed's perspective, these kinds of innovations, these are not techno fixes. These are very sort of simple innovations that can really help consumers. What is the role of technology when we're talking about this issue? Because there are lots of sort of low-tech solutions, and then there are really high-tech solutions.
Well, I mean, I think it does kind of run that gamut, as you just said, but I think that's one of the things that's really exciting about this issue is that you don't need, as to your point before, you don't need incredibly hard technology to solve it. It's more about changing behavior. It's more about getting different parts of a system that's kind of sprawling and broken to work together. And you know, sometimes maybe that can be harder than developing technology. But I think both of these products, they're both fun, they're both engaging, and you know, that's important. I think that's the magic that we need to try to make some real change here, because so much of it does come down to consumers and our behavior. Yeah, we can all channel Taylor Swift. Hi, it's me. I'm the problem. It's me. And ReFed's numbers show that I think 50% almost of all food surplus is coming from households. And then if you add to that the statistics around consumer-facing businesses like retailers and food service, that's like another 20%. So our behavior influences, it ripples all the way up the chain, and you know, retailers they're not going to want to stock produce that doesn't look perfect because they think that we, the consumer, expect that. Or a restaurant is going to assume that consumers are going to expect a great big plate of food, even if they know that half of that's going to get just scraped into the trash at the end of the service. This all comes down to behavior of the consumer. And so I'm not sure that there are some areas where technology development is needed, but sometimes it's just as simple as getting the consumer to pay attention.
Well, and I love what you said about making it fun and engaging, and I love that, but how much is fun and engaging? Harry.
Meaning how much is it?
How much is it going to cost?
Okay, so Mill is a food recycling service. It costs about $1 a day, and that's not nothing. It's where we're starting, though, and I think You know, technology adoption is an interesting thing to think about. Solar panels, refrigerators, cars, an airplane ticket. You know, over time, the price of these things change, and when you're building the first of its kind of something, it does tend to be expensive. That said, you know, as we think about planetary tipping points and the urgent need to get food out of landfills and reduced food waste, this, for us at Mill, can't be viewed as a success if we're only in a small percentage of households. We want this to be accessible to as many people as possible, ideally everyone, and the way to do that is have it be free. And I think this is where public-private partnership starts to come in. It's interesting, you know, in studying this space, most Americans don't actually know what they pay for waste. And something that's actually pretty cool, this is a 2006 number from EPA, but there are around 7,000 communities in the United States that have what's called a pay-as-you-throw rate structure for waste. So you pay monthly for waste, but you pay less if you send less to the landfill. And more municipalities are moving to a rate structure like this, where if you put less in a curbside cart that is landfill bound, you pay lower on your bill. And actually, Mill has engaged in a few pilots with cities, some that have pay-as-you-throw rate structures, some that don't. But an example would be the city of Tacoma, Washington, great place, have curbside collection for food scraps, but noticed that the participation was low. And the cool thing in Tacoma is the rate structure is so steep that if you get a Mill bin and you downsize your curbside trash cart, the cost of Mill goes from something like $30 a month down to something like $8 a month. There are cities all around the country where you can save more than $30 a month by downsizing your waste bin. And then I think another, you know, cool thing is we're doing a pilot in the city of Pittsburgh that's thinking about standing up an organics collection or thinking about how to enable organics recycling in Pittsburgh. And Mill is part of that pilot, and that's USDA funded. As these systems scale, though, and as I mentioned before, one needs to have an eye on efficiency. And if we're reducing waste, the idea is that at scale, this is going to be more efficient than the system that exists today. But we're aware that the price of Mill today might not be accessible for everyone.
Sure.
We also can't make that many bins today as we get started, but we know that to have the impact we want to have, you know, we want this to be free for as many people as possible.
It's exciting, that's exciting. Stephanie, how much is the Smart Jar going to cost me?
You know, I can't tell you because they didn't give me a number. Same thing, though, it needs to be affordable for people.
Sure.
It can't be this $50 jar you're going to stick in there. So I think it's going to be very affordable for consumers to use and to have in their fridge.
Caroline, you mentioned fun and engaging. It has to be affordable, though, too, right, from REFED's perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely needs to be affordable. And I think you just made a great point before, Harry, about how people just have no idea how much their waste is costing them in general. And so finding ways to kind of make it clear or kind of bringing to light some of the true cost of day-to-day life and how implementing a solution that seems on the face of it to be expensive, but over time saves you money. Finding ways to communicate that, I think, is really important because that's how we're going to make change on this issue.
We're paying for waste management, and the average American throws out 600 pounds of food a year, which per USDA is like $1,500 to $2,000 of food wasted. Another way to visualize it, shout out to REFED, you go to the grocery store, you buy 5 bags of groceries, and we basically leave 2 in the parking lot.
Yeah.
So it's money. You know, there's just money being spent here. And, you know, how do we make it easy to have a better understanding of being able to right-size purchasing behavior or extend meals over the course of the week? But this is a really tractable problem. And it's methane. Like, it's the thing we need to cut down on today. I didn't mean to knock nuclear fusion earlier. I'm stoked for it in 2040, 2050. It's going to be great. But we need to do things today to slow down warming. And reducing food waste is a super tractable and actionable thing we can do today.
One of the things we've seen with the Fridge Night app when we first launched it, we did some pilots with it, I think it was, people were saving over 50% of food, that reduction immediately. So by using it and getting in a habit of, okay, one night a week, we're going to clean out the fridge, we're going to eat the leftovers, or we're going to do something with it. And it's making a habit change, but that's so hard for all of us. And I know, I'm a working mom. We've got practices and things that pop up, and I'm way too tired and I just don't want to cook tonight. Those nights that you just get takeout, or what is that? And so it's hard for all of us, but how can we get into a habit within that? And that's something we all have to do.
Sure. Thanks for that. I do want to get back to this urgency point that Harry brought up, because I think what often gets lost during Climate Week here in New York, and often at a lot of big conferences, is the sort of connection. We're here to talk about the climate crisis, but there's also a hunger crisis going on right now. And I want, if all three of you could sort of speak to how reducing food waste is going to help solve the hunger crisis in the United States and around the world. I don't know who wants to take this on first.
Well, I think there's certainly an intersection there, right? And it's absurd when you think about it, how much food is getting just thrown away, and how many people are going hungry. And I think if there's no other indicator, that tells you everything you need to know about how broken the food system is. And I know that targeting food waste solutions, it's not going to be the silver bullet to also ending hunger, because there's complexity there. But certainly at ReFed, we also think about food recovery and food rescue, and how we can help support that sector, and bringing in technology to help become more efficient, so that food can be diverted and directed toward people who are experiencing food insecurity in kind of the most direct way, so that you don't end up in a situation which, if you've ever kind of volunteered at a food pantry or been at a food pantry, and sometimes you see the quality of the food is sort of, so-so. So at ReFed, we're constantly on the lookout for solutions that can make that food recovery, food rescue process more accessible to people, more kind of culturally relevant foods being shared, and just a more streamlined process. But that is certainly one piece of this puzzle.
More dignified as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
Harry?
I guess I would say on this, in the food waste equation, and this has come up a couple times on this panel, it is us. This is not an on-the-farm problem. Yes, there's food waste on farms. This is not predominantly a grocery store problem. This is not predominantly a restaurant problem. It is predominantly an in our homes, in our kitchens problem. Food is the #1 thing in the landfill. Households account for more than half of that food in the landfill. It's crazy. So I think, and it's an interconnected system. If we're producing almost 2 times as much food as being eaten, and it's not flowing to the right places, any food that's wasted is going to exacerbate that problem. Not to mention the long-term implications of how the agricultural industry needs to scale to feed the world without frying it, to borrow a line from Mike Grunwald. We use like 1/3 of the Earth's arable land today to grow food to feed animals. And then the idea that a piece of protein comes to your house and it gets thrown away after all of that, it's just not going to work. And we're not heading towards a future of resource abundance. So we can't kind of keep operating the same way in the status quo. How to solve that problem? With 5 minutes to go on the panel?
Well, I have another question for you.
Challenging, but I think it starts with awareness. Each of us can become more aware and more attuned to what we're doing in our kitchens, because it really does add up. And I think an area that we invest in at Mill is thinking about, look, there's an app. You don't need the app to operate the bin, but there are insights in there. Help you understand the impact you're having. Help you understand how much you're wasting. And that awareness starts to drive better decision making, because wasting food is expensive as well as really, really problematic for the planet.
Education is certainly key, and I think respecting food, respecting farmers, respecting all of the labor and the natural resources that go into this is a really key part of that as well.
And Feeding America is a huge partner for Unilever and many food companies out there in our own in-house operations and what we use. But I think if you look at it from the three: prevent, rescue, and recycling. If we go into it with that on how can you prevent it from happening, okay, in the case of where we're not, where can we rescue it, get it to those who need it more than we do, and then in the end, where can you recycle it so it's not going to that landfill within. So if you kind of look at it in that way,
Right.
that mindset, you can do that.
Right, it's really helpful to consumers, I think, to think about those three things. I do want to end with, we're at Climate Week. The UN General Assembly is happening. We're all getting ready for COP28 in Dubai later this year, where lots of different kinds of decisions will be made about the future of the planet, right? So from each of you, what's your call to action to consumers, to policymakers, to all of us who are a part of this? So Stephanie, if I can start with you.
So I mentioned on policy, Date Labeling Act. Please contact your member of Congress and encourage them to sponsor the bill and also vote for it when it comes up. That we think that's a huge thing. Just a little change there can help that confusion piece within it. And then I also just think we have to take action at home. So where can you consciously make a change, a practice change? It's not always going to be perfect, but how can consumers, and how can we educate consumers to help them do that and make it as easy as possible through our Fridge Night app and those types of things? Where can we help within that? So it's little things that together will make a big change.
And such a good point. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's trying. And I think that's what we all need to remember, that it's about trying and failing and then trying again. Carrie.
Yeah, there's a phrase we talk about internally, which is that imperfect action is better than perfect inaction. And I think that's a good mindset for how we tackle the climate crisis. There's not going to be any one silver bullet. It's going to be an ensemble approach of different efforts that get us towards no food in landfills or no food waste, period, or more equity and the more efficient spread of food around the planet. I think the call to action for folks here is, and forgive me if you're already programmed this way, but I wasn't. Think about an apple core and a plastic bottle in your hand, and know actually that it's worse to throw that apple core in a trash can than it is to throw that plastic bottle in a trash can. Unfortunately, plastic recycling doesn't always work, but what we know that happens when food goes into the landfill is it breaks down anaerobically and creates methane. And this is just a really big problem, and one that we don't really think about as much as we should as a society. So food waste at home, big problem. You can do something about it. Eat what you buy what you need, and if there's food that isn't eaten, please don't put it in a trash can.
Thanks, Carrie. Caroline, you get the last word.
All right, well, I feel negligent that we got to the end of the panel and I didn't say anything about funding before, but I think it's absolutely critical. We need more funding to be funding these solutions. We know what the solutions are. We know that they work, and ReFed tracks funding into food waste solutions and has been looking at this over the last 10 years. And we calculate that about $1 billion in private investment is coming into food waste solutions each year. And that needs to be like 3 to 4 times higher than that in our estimation. And philanthropic funding is where you can really have a big impact, because the philanthropic funding is what is seeding new solutions. It is what is sustaining sort of the solutions that need like a longer time horizon to show their potential, which you have to expect when you're dealing with a system that's as broken as the food system and trying to recreate it brand new. So my call to action is that if you are a funder or you have friends who are funders, talk about this often, frequently. Visit the ReFed website. We have a solutions database of investment-ready solutions that are ready to go and just need the capital to scale up. So this is a solvable problem. It needs funding. It needs enabling policy environment. It needs consumers. And we have control over so many of those pieces. So.
Perfect point to end on. Thank you so much. Please give a round of applause to this panel. Thank you all so much. Thanks to the Nest and thanks to Hellmann's. Thank you all.